host, Brian Fisher. The program is Focal Point. The network is the American Family Radio Talk Network, AFR Talk, the most feared radio network in all of America. By the way, I tell you at the end of every program, every day I tell you, we are fighting a winnable war. I got more proof, ladies and gentlemen. Here it is. The more Americans, listen to me now, this is important. This is your factoid of the day, the Fisher factoid of the day. More Americans believe in Bigfoot than in global warming. Ladies and gentlemen, we are fighting a winnable war. 33% of Americans believe in Bigfoot. Just 18% believe that global warming is our top environmental concern. We are indeed fighting a winnable war. Now, I want to shift gears, again, talking about the economy. We've been talking about that with regard to Governor Romney's statements yesterday. And we'll get back to that, spend some more time on that. But you also may be aware that the Federal Reserve under Ben Bernanke is committing themselves to print more money. Now, I don't understand the ins and outs of the Federal Reserve, this quantitative easing business. I know they're down in the basement printing money, but all the implications. I want to bring in Peter Wierenga, who is a good friend. He's a financial advisor with Berthel Fisher and Company. He is our kind of Wall Street economic guru. Peter, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Thank you, Brian. It's always good to be talking with you.
Well, it's great to be with you. Peter sends out a weekly update, a weekly newsletter. You can get a copy of it delivered right to your inbox by going to calling 855-220-0422, 855-220-0422, and get that newsletter right in your inbox. So, Peter, talk to us about this QE3. It's kind of slid under the radar. A lot of things crowding it out. I think it's pretty important from an economic standpoint. Tell us what the Fed is going to do and what the implications are for the economy.
Well, what was most interesting to me this last Thursday, Brian, was that even folks in my industry, folks who are in the know about this sort of thing, were actually shocked by Chairman Bernanke's decision and by the Fed decision. And what they're doing is, I've heard it referred to often as QE infinity. What that means is that they have made a decision that they are going to commit, and commit means print out of thin air, $40 billion a month to be used to buy mortgages. And they're going to do that until such time as the labor figures improve. Now, that shows you what a strange concept this is, and what's going on is Chairman Bernanke, he believes that it basically, at this point, what this move is saying is he believes it is up to him and him alone to stimulate the economy.
Now I want to go back, Peter, to what you said. There's $40 billion a month to buy mortgages. Now, who's going to buy these mortgages? Where's that money going? Who's it going to?
The Fed buys the mortgages. Basically, mortgages, and this gets back to the housing crisis of a couple of years ago, mortgages are packaged by lenders and sold as investments. Sold in huge bundles. You'll package thousands and thousands of mortgages together. They're sold as investments. Well, the Fed is going to start buying those.
Wait a minute. Hold the phone. You telling me the Federal Reserve is going to start buying mortgages?
Well, they're buying they're buying them as an investment, not individually, but yes, they're buying huge groups of mortgages in order to get money back into the lending system so that the current banks and investors who own those mortgages will have more money to work with to invest in other things. That's the idea behind it.
Now, let me ask you this question. These derivatives, these are derivatives, right? Is that what they're called? Derivatives?
No. These are not derivatives at all. That's something completely different. This is just, think of it as though everybody on your block who has a mortgage on their house, those mortgages are at the bank, and an investor comes along and says, I will buy all 10 of those mortgages, so the bank gets the money so that they can loan it out again, and you as an investor now own those mortgages and get the interest income from those mortgages secured by those houses.
Now, let me go back to the housing market collapse, because my understanding, Peter, and correct me if I'm wrong, that kind of what was at the root of that is that you had lenders that knew they had these underperforming mortgages, and they tried to conceal that by bundling a whole bunch of these together and then selling them to unwitting investors who would buy them on the promise of this rich income stream from all these mortgage payments coming in. But when the mortgage people stopped paying on their mortgages, then those mortgage-backed securities or whatever they were just virtually became worthless overnight. And part of what perpetuated the problem or delayed the inevitable, I guess, was these investors buying up these mortgages. It kind of concealed the fact for a brief period of time that we had this huge problem. And then the people that bought all these package mortgages, they're the ones that got stuck with the bill. If that happens again, that would be the Fed, that would be the taxpayers stuck with the bill. Am I wrong about that?
Well, you're wrong in your, or I'm sorry, you're right in your conclusion. I would have a slightly different perspective on exactly how we got there and what the problem was and what actually ended up precipitating the crisis. But the conclusion for our purposes is right, and that is if with all those mortgages that are bundled, if we have another housing crisis, and that would be hard to have another one on top of the one we have because we haven't begun to recover from the one that we have. If we had another one, then yes, those mortgages would decrease in value, and that would be a taxpayer loss, absolutely.
Now, you said that this is basically money that is being created out of thin air. I use the analogy of Ben Bernanke down in the basement just cranking out money on a printing machine. So when you say this is money out of thin air, what do you mean by that?
Well, basically, Bernanke's down in the basement with the printing machine. I mean, it's hard for us to quite wrap our minds around that, but the reality is that not being on the gold standard anymore or anything like that, the Fed can print money. That's it, out of thin air, and that's why
So this is money. This is currency that's in circulation, but it's not backed by any real asset or economic growth. And it would seem to me, Peter, that one of the effects of that would be to devalue the value of the currency, that the money that we do have in our wallets. It's worth less. And at some point, it seems like we're going to have runaway inflation with all this money floating around out there. What about that?
Absolutely correct on that. It's not money that's in circulation until it's printed. Then it just adds to the circulation. So think of I guess one way to think of it would be if a young person all of a sudden gets a $2 million inheritance, then they're willing to go out and pay whatever they want to pay for whatever they're buying, which means everything they buy is going to be increased in price because there is so much money out there. So yes, inflation, and that's one of the things that folks are agreeing with, and that's actually something that people are saying was behind Bernanke's decision, is that he wants to see not runaway inflation, but he wants to see inflation because the more inflation, the less our dollars are worth, the easier it is to pay off our debt because we're paying it off with inflated dollars.
Let me ask you this question. It seems like Bernanke has spent an effort, and the Federal Reserve has spent a lot of energy trying to keep interest rates low. I keep reading articles about lowest mortgage rates in whatever amount of time. So it seems that part of what they've been trying to do is keep interest rates low by printing all of this money, but it seems at some point that catches up to you, and when you take the cap off of that thing, it's like shaking up a Coke bottle, take the cap off, you just get stuff all over yourself. It seems to me at that point you'd have almost uncontrollable inflation. Is my analysis of that wrong or right?
Well, I don't believe we are in this country going to have uncontrollable inflation, but could we get back to the 10, 12% inflation that we had in the early 80s? Absolutely. And that's part of what I'm thinking through, and I'm going to try to address in my newsletters in the next couple of weeks. We have now set irrevocably down a path that is not going to be good either way for at least a couple of years. If President Obama is reelected, we're in big trouble going forward, period, end of story. But even if Romney is reelected, for him to try to undo what has been done, allow interest rates to go up naturally, allow the free markets to work, will mean that we will have at least 2 or 3 years of major pain, just like we had during the first 2 years of Reagan's term. If you remember, 80 to 82 were miserable years in the economy because he had to begin to undo things that had been done, allow the free markets to work. So any way you look at it, I need to explore this a little bit more, we are in for at least a couple of years of major pain in the economy.
You know, Jan Bryan, my co-producer, came in at the break and said somebody posted on her Facebook page a picture of George Bush with kind of a goofy smile. and the caption was, if Obama gets reelected, just think of the mess he's going to inherit this time at his own doing. And Jeff Reed, my other co-producer, he asked me this question, and it's a good question. I ask you, Peter, if they can just go down in the basement and print money, why don't we just send them our 1040 forms and let them print off the money to pay our tax burden? Why don't we do that?
We can ask them to do that, see if they'll go along with that. We'll have to, I'll let you check that out with them, Brian.
But anyway, so what I hear you saying, and let me ask you a last question before I let you go, Peter. This, with an election coming up, Bernanke's an Obama guy. Does it look to you like this is politically motivated to try to get some kind of an injection into the economy in time to save Obama's bacon?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you got to wonder that, because this is so much going down the path that Obama wants to go down, keeping interest rates low, trying to get unemployment rates down. But what I think it's actually a little bit different than that. I think that he believes that President Obama is at a complete and total loss as to how to get the economy back on track, and that Congress is completely deadlocked and won't do anything, and Congress and the president won't do anything. So I honestly think that he believes that he is the only one in the country who is willing to do anything, and so he takes this bad measure, this drastically bad measure, in order to try to get the economy stimulated.
Our guest has been Peter Wierenga, financial advisor with Berthel Fisher and Company. Peter, thank you for taking time to be with us. You want to get his weekly update right in your inbox, weekly newsletter, go to call 855-220-0422, 855-220-0422. Thanks, Peter. Always informative to have you on. Thanks for taking time to be with us.
Thank you, Brian. Take care.
Peter Wierenga, financial advisor with Berthel Fisher and Company. By the way, speaking of doing nothing, I've got an article here by Thomas Sowell indicating for the first 150 years of this country's existence, when you had an economic slump, the federal government did nothing. Nothing. Zero. Zip. Nobody even thought it was the government's problem to solve it. We had recessions that were much shorter and rebounds that were much stronger and quicker. Back in 2, Focal Point AFR Talk, 888-589-8840.